listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? It's week 4. Guys, the first 3 weeks have just flown by. I really just wish the season would restart because I want that much more football. Jeff, Joe, I have a weird question to start the show out for you guys.
The answer is yes. I'm wearing pants tonight.
Darn, that's just depressing. All right, so my question is, what is the one player on your rosters right now you are the most panicked about? Your immediate
Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, quick answer on that one.
I don't know if I'm panicked about any player on my roster, but I would say the one that's giving me the most concern right now, the one I'm kind of like just feeling uneasy about, is actually Will Fuller.
I get that. Yeah, I'm a Will Fuller owner too, and I get it.
I can see that too, totally. Because it feels like the appeal, we were talking about this pre-show, it feels like the appeal of Will Fuller is that he was getting all the weighted opportunity. Like any throw that was downfield that wasn't going to DeAndre Hopkins was going to Will Fuller. And now it's like 50-50 split with Kenny Stills. And like in terms of short and intermediate routes, I think Kenny Stills is a better wide receiver than Will Fuller is.
Yeah, and I'll agree with all of that. I mean, I look at Fuller, he's had 7 targets each of the last 2 games, but I just don't feel like the return has been there. And he keeps sitting on my bench. I don't need to start him, but man, I really want to. I just like Will Fuller. I've always had kind of a man crush on him, and I really want him to do well, but I just can't make that move to get him in my lineup.
No, he'll have a hot streak, though. Like, he'll have 3 games in a row with a touchdown at some point this year.
And then I'll probably end up trading him because that's what I always end up doing.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you know what would really help Will Fuller? If you wore pants.
Well, I mean, I'm wearing pants tonight. I mean, look, I don't do it all the time, but I'm wearing it tonight for you. I mean, that's where we're at tonight.
All right, guys, we got a lot to get into. Y'all ready to dive in?
Do it.
Let's do it.
News and notes from across the NFL.
All right, a couple of quick hit things to start out. The Seahawks have signed Luke Wilson after trading Nick Vannett to the Steelers in the wake of Vance McDonald and Xavier Grimble's injuries. That was a mouthful, guys.
Wilson!
Luke Wilson.
I like Luke Wilson after Hard Knocks. He's a pretty fun character on the show.
I mean, you have to be when you spell your name with 2 L's.
Idiocracy is a good movie, though.
Joe, I'm going to make a confession to you right now. I've never seen it.
What?
Yeah.
That is absolutely terrible. You need to go watch that movie immediately right now because the world is turning into that. It's a documentary film now.
Now the Takeaway Nation knows why I had to hide that for 3 years. I assumed if I told Joe, he'd lose all respect. So our entire friendship, I've kept that hidden.
No, it wasn't respect. It was just a significant amount of anger coming your way.
Oh, Christ. Next up, after the Jared Stidham debacle on Sunday, the Patriots have signed quarterback Cody Kessler. Neither matters. Tom Brady's going to play forever.
Know your backups. Know your backups.
And lastly, for our minor points, Jalen Ramsey has left the Jags facility to be there for the birth of his daughter. No timetable has been set for his return. Jacksonville does play at Denver on Sunday.
If he's out, the Denver wide receivers definitely get a little bump because I think you've got to be a little nervous to play guys like Cortland Sutton, like Emmanuel Sanders, and you're still a little bit nervous. That defense is good, but without Jalen Ramsey, it's just not exactly the same.
I think depending on my lineup, I'm going to play Emmanuel Sanders either way. I feel like they're not going to move Jalen inside to cover him.
Well, Emmanuel Sanders has only played 24% of his snaps in the slot so far this year. He's playing an almost completely different role in this offense.
Dang. Okay. Well, see, now I haven't watched enough Denver because, well, Joe Flacco makes me sad, so I've just avoided it.
Yeah.
I get that. He makes me sad too, and I'm a Broncos fan.
I watched the whole game, but I'm sad while I do it.
Jesus, why do you hate yourself?
Because I'm a Broncos fan and I have Joe Flacco as my quarterback. Isn't that obvious, Jeff?
Oh, man. There's a level of self-flagellation here that I just can't understand.
Fun fact, Joe, when he watches those games, mutes the television and just has Hello Darkness, My Old Friend playing on repeat in the background.
Yeah. How did you know, Murph?
I have
You've never been to my house on Sunday?
Yeah, I have cameras in there.
That is creepy.
A little bit. All right, let's keep moving. The last bit of news is the biggest one. Melvin Gordon has reportedly notified the Chargers that he will report to the team facility on Thursday. He won't play Sunday, but should be available for next week.
I'm really curious about what's going to happen with Austin Eckler here because he's played so well. Like, is this going to be a 50-50 split?
I hope so.
Me too.
I mean, I've got a bunch of Eckler, so I'm hoping he still has a significant role. I think at minimum, we'll see the role that we saw last year, but Gordon's not going to step right in after staying out the whole offseason program and staying away from the team during the preseason, being out to this point in the season and just walk in football shape. It's going to take a few weeks for him to really get his role back. So I think he can probably still deploy Eckler as a low-end RB2 flex running back with some confidence, just because that offense is still going to pile up some yards.
Yeah, and points too. So you can, there is some touchdown upside. It's not like Eckler's totally dead right away.
Right. Agreed. That's why I just want to make sure we didn't fan the flames of fear here. We go ahead and everybody just stay calm. Go ahead and keep deploying Eckler. You're going to be okay.
Yeah, I only have Eckler in one spot where I really need to use him, and I'm really hoping that one of my other running backs emerges, or I can just use Chris Thompson for a while. But I think a lot of people are going to be in those kind of situations. I could see that being one of the questions that I answer the most on my Sunday live streams.
And one thing I also want to note is that while he has sat out the first few games of the season, so theoretically the timetable should be a little different, Melvin Gordon is notorious for going down during the fantasy playoffs or the regular playoffs. So keep Austin Eckler kind of in mind. Keep him on your roster. I wouldn't panic and sell him or anything like that unless you get a good deal for him, because people are going to try and buy him knowing that Melvin Gordon is pretty likely to go down week 13.
Yeah, for me, your sell window on Austin Eckler closed today.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's start out with the guys who are out. Obviously, Cam Newton, Saquon Barkley, Drew Brees, Tyreek Hill, Michael Gallup is still out, AJ Green, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed, and big probably Damian Williams, who did not practice with that knee injury still. Any comments, guys?
Damian Williams is a guy you got to keep your eye on because Darrell Williams was a guy that we talked about in Tapping the Wire, and he could be a play if Damian Williams doesn't play. But if Damian Williams does play, all of a sudden he's totally dead.
Yeah, I mean, if Damian Williams doesn't play and say LaShawn McCoy is out still too, Darrell Williams is a guy you got to run with. And I still think adding Darwin Thompson on the cheap right now is a worthwhile investment for most deeper rostered teams.
All right, let's move on to the questionable guys. The Patriots are kind of doing what the Patriots do here. Tom Brady, Rex Burkhead, Julian Edelman, and Matt LaCosse were all limited. As far as jumping into the other positions, other teams, quarterbacks, Case Keenum did not practice with that foot injury. Any worries about Case Keenum? Because my McLaurin shares are pretty high.
Is Colt McCoy or Dwayne Haskins a downgrade from Case Keenum?
We don't know.
We have no clue, but there's a chance that it's an upgrade.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
I'm not worried about deploying F1 at this point, and that's McLaurin for those of you that are keeping score at home. You know, like McLaurin F1, he's going to be McLaurin F1 because he's fast. Anybody?
No, not anybody, Jeff.
Well, I'm using F1 anyway.
Okay.
All right, moving into running backs. Ito Smith did not participate in practice with a concussion. Devin Singletary, a hamstring. Royce Freeman, limited practice with a shoulder. And Rashad Penny did not practice with a hamstring injury. Devin Singletary needs to get on the field soon.
Yeah, I don't think it's this week, though.
No.
I don't think Rashad Penny's going to play this week either, and Ito Smith is kind of a coin flip.
Yeah, and well, the Bills aren't going to rush Singletary back when they've got, the crypt keeper, holding it down in the backfield right now. I don't know what Lazarus Pitt or whatever other, making yourself young again Pitt Frank Gore has found, but he just keeps being productive. So there's no reason to rush him back when they're 3-0. Ito Smith, I'm less concerned with. Royce Freeman, they still have Philip Lindsay, less concerned. Rashad Penny, I think this only matters if you're worried about Chris Carson holding on to the rock. Yeah, I'm not too worried about any of these guys right now because I wasn't really starting most of them anyway.
I wasn't starting them anyway, but they do significantly affect the other backs that you were just talking about. Like if Royce Freeman misses, all of a sudden Philip Lindsay should probably be in your top 12 this week.
Yeah, and that's probably a fair assumption. I just don't know. And again, I haven't watched enough of the Broncos. I can only go by just some play count numbers here. I can't imagine they're going to want to just crush him with carries and touches at this point in the season. They're probably going to have to figure it out some other backs to give that guy a breather so they don't overuse him again.
Sure, but I think that he gets more weighted opportunity if Royce Freeman is out. I think he becomes the goal line guy.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I think he should be the goal line guy already. He's not a hammer, but he's more versatile at the goal line if you ask me.
All right, moving into wide receivers, a considerably longer list. T.Y. Hilton has that quad injury. He did not participate in practice. Amari Cooper was limited with an ankle. Manuel Sanders has a quad injury. He was limited as well. Mike Williams with his back did not participate in practice. Calvin Ridley with a hip, limited practice. Chris Godwin with a hip as well. He did not practice at all. Taylor Gabriel concussion. Demir Bird hamstring. Danny Amendola with a chest injury. Chris Connolly with a knee injury. Albert Wilson with a calf injury. Traquan Smith with an ankle injury. And I can breathe.
Before you got to Taylor Gabriel on that list, I thought you were just reading the starting lineups off of my team.
I thought I was too. Yeah. I was excited about it.
I'm so upset about this list of wide receivers. I don't think T.Y. Hilton's going to play. I do think Amari Cooper is going to play. Emmanuel Sanders is going to play. Mike Williams, like 50-50. Calvin Ridley, I do think he's going to play. What do we think about Chris Godwin? Is this why we saw Mike Evans explode and Chris Godwin disappear?
I mean, I think so. There's probably something to that. Anytime you've got a hip issue, that can really impact, your speed and your ability to run your routes and things like that. It's we don't know exactly what's going on with the hip. If it's like a flexor or pointer, like we have no idea. So we don't know if it's just pain management or if he's just sore. But I would assume that if this isn't, cinched up to at least a limited participant by, say, Thursday, that, it's probably more serious than we'd like. And Mike Evans is going to be a guy that's going to put up another big game.
I think if they're giving more attention to Mike Evans in that game, you're in trouble period. Like if you just probably don't, especially for DFS, you just don't want to invest in that game with that offense at all.
Well, I mean, nearly 200 air yards for Mike Evans last week. That's a lot of opportunity right there.
They play the Rams though, right? So like we're looking at not Janoris Jenkins in the biggest way.
That's fair. And it's probably Aqib Talib at that point or Peters because they're not going to travel with Evans. But I like his chances there because Peters has been known to give up big plays deep. And then Aqib Talib, guy has been solid for a really long time, but I don't know if he's got the vertical game to play with Evans.
My concern is that their safeties have been significantly better this year, and it's made both Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib look good.
That's fair. I'll grant you that.
And lastly, tight ends. Mark Andrews with a foot did not practice. Delaney Walker with his knee did not practice. And Vance McDonald. We just don't know.
We keep seeing Mark. We do kind of know he has a shoulder thing. I was going to talk about Mark Andrews, but Vance McDonald seems pretty pertinent. He has a shoulder thing. We don't know because they play on Monday night. So we don't know if he's going to be a limited participant. We learned that Xavier Grimmer was going on IR, and that could be the reason why they went and signed Wilson. But,
You mean traded for Nick Vanette?
Oh, yeah. That was a fail.
Sorry, buddy. That was a real good one, too. I didn't want to interrupt your Wilson poll.
Joe, I'm going to request you change that phrase. I think we need to make a rule on the Fantasy Takeaway that you can't use a Tom Hanks quote that's not from the best Tom Hanks movie.
You can use any Tom Hanks quote, Murphy. Any Tom Hanks.
I'm going to side with Joe on
Tom
that.
Hanks is an American treasure, Hamilton. Come on.
He is.
Absolutely
he is. You're right.
He should actually have his face next to the presidents on Mount Rushmore.
No, that's too far. Too far, Jeff.
Don't at me.
Well, yeah, he has a shoulder. Back to all of this. He has a shoulder, but they're saying that the trade wasn't because of the shoulder and that he's going to be okay. It might be coach speak. Who knows? But that report came out a few hours ago. So something to think about.
Just for those of you keeping track at home, by the way, the Steelers have now given up 3 2020 draft picks.
It's such a good draft, too. Like, what are they doing?
That was what I was kind of putting out into the world just now, is that they either have a lot of faith in what's in their building or they really hate this draft class, because to give away your 1, your 5, and what was it, their 3, or was it their 2 they gave away? I know they've given away 3 picks. I just couldn't remember if it was the 1st and the 2nd and the 5th, or if it was the 1st and the 3rd and the 5th. Either way, it's a lot of draft capital to give up.
It is. What do we think about all this Mark Andrews noise? Because he seems like he's missing or limited in a practice every single week. But this was the first week where it kind of did look like he was actually limited in the game.
Yeah, I mean, and you could see it because they didn't really look his way as often as they could have, even when he was open. I think there's something legitimately going on there. And hopefully it's not like this Liz Frank thing that's going around that everyone seems to be getting right now. But, it's a chance where if you own Andrews and you bought him cheap, if you've got the roster spot, go buy up Hurst or go buy up Boyle. Go get the other Ravens tight ends because they will target their tight ends all day.
Do you think that Sammy Watkins is contagious?
I mean, he's probably contagious the same way like smallpox is contagious.
Like, it seems like everyone gets feet injuries now, and Sammy Watkins seemed like he was doing it before he was cool, so.
He's definitely a foot injury hipster.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going.
Way to explain the joke, Jeff.
Sorry, man. I missed the joke. I'm not that smart.
All right. Anybody I failed to mention? Anybody you guys want to deep dive in on before we get out of here?
Well, I mean, I did have some defensive players listed here. Darius Leonard, when the Colts don't have Darius Leonard, that run defense is absolutely awful. So you can target them if he's out, and I really wouldn't if he's in. So he's one of those guys you definitely want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, in that defense as a whole, with no Darius Leonard, holding it down in the middle of the field, and now Malik Hooker's gone too. The whole middle of that defense is in big trouble, whether you're running it or throwing it. I think that you're probably deploying more players than usual against Colts defense this week.
Agreed.
All right, and lastly, I've got a list of likely to play. We got Greg Olsen with a back who was limited in practice, LaShawn McCoy with his ankle limited as well, and Alshon Jeffrey was removed from the injury report. Any notes, guys?
I don't think so. I mean, like, LaShawn McCoy said he was going to play, and he got in a limited session, so that's good. I'm pretty worried about playing Alshon Jeffrey anyway, though. Like, you may have drafted him in a spot where you don't have, like, a better option at the position, but that defense has looked way better for the Packers. And I'm really not a big fan of playing Thursday night players that were on the injury report.
Yeah, I'm not a big Alshon Jeffrey guy to begin with. But, I mean, Greg Olsen's back should be fine, at least. That's the guy that I'm looking at the hardest. His back is only a little sore, and it's probably just from carrying around those receivers and carrying that passing game on his back last week. But I'm sure he'll be okay and ready to go Sunday.
Cheap dates.
All right, my favorite segment of the week, our cheap date segment. We're going to go head to head, see who can pick the best DraftKings lineup with the lowest amount of money. That's correct, Joe, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically we're looking for the most points per dollar that we spend.
Makes sense to me. I'm still getting used to this DraftKings format. Forgive me on this. Let's dive into quarterbacks. Joe, who is your quarterback cheap date this week?
My quarterback is, it's kind of a crutch argument, but I don't think it's actually a crutch argument when the Kansas City Chiefs are the opponents. This is going to be a high-scoring game, at least for the Chiefs, and I think Matthew Stafford is going to be playing from behind. So I'll even consider stacking Matthew Stafford with a pass catcher. Maybe even your tight end, Murph.
Garbage time. Lots of garbage time.
I think there is going to be a lot of garbage time. And Matthew Stafford has been a pretty decent quarterback this year. He looks certainly better than he did last year.
All right, I'm next, and I'm going to go one more time. Jacoby Brissett plays against the Raiders this week, and I feel that game might be high scoring as well. You guys mentioned all the things going on with the Colts defense. I feel like this game may get into the 30s, and I think that Jacoby Brissett is good for at least 2 touchdowns. So one more time, I'm going to roll with him and hope he gives me good points again.
Yeah, I like most of Jacoby Brissett's metrics. Like, his deep passing leaves something to be desired, but TD percentage is good. He's projected pretty well in most spots that I'm seeing, and he's cheap. So those are things that you look for in a cheap date.
Who do you stack him with if you're going to stack against the Raiders, knowing T.Y. Hilton's probably out? Buying a cheap Deion Kane, Paris Campbell.
I think I'd probably take the touchdown upside with Paris Campbell because I really feel like they're trying to get him going near the red zone or in the red zone.
Cool.
This weird, insane part of me wanted to go Chester Rogers.
But it probably wouldn't have been that far off. It's okay.
God, I hope we can revisit this show next week and go, Murphy, your random inside your head voice was right. That'd be great.
Paris Campbell is kind of just slightly taller T.Y. Hilton, though, like athletic profile wise, though, right?
Essentially.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Jeff, you're up. Who is your quarterback cheap date this week?
Oh, man. I'm taking my dude, my newly minted, almost favorite quarterback, Danny Dimes. We're going for 2 this week. Back-to-back, QB1 weeks for him.
So what we've learned here is that Jeff and I are unoriginal on our cheap dates. We're good to go with the guy 2-3 weeks in a row.
Hey, there's something to be said for reliability, Murph.
There is.
Okay.
There is a lot to be said for that. At some point, they just become rosterable quarterbacks, and we called them in the first few weeks. So
Well, let's be clear. The Giants are playing the Redskins, and I just don't think their back end is very good. And with Sterling Shepard, in the fold and looking pretty decent, Evan Ingram looks pretty decent. And, Jones has shown that he can run, he can make a quick throw, he can do a few things for you. I wouldn't be shocked if they just steamrolled the Redskins.
I wouldn't either. And look at the points that they've given up. Even Mitchell Trubisky scored 20 plus points against that defense. Mitch Trubisky has been garbage this year, and he was even garbage in that game, and he managed to put up 23.8 points.
Yeah, so for 5,300, I'm feeling pretty good about my investment there.
Sure, you could get 5X pretty darn easily, especially if it turns into a shootout, which is totally plausible.
Sure.
All right, let's dive into running backs. Jeff, you're up first on this one. Who is your running back cheap date this week?
Well, I got a little original here, Murph. You'll appreciate this because it's not nearly the retread I was going with on my quarterback. But I'm taking James White, running back from New England. They've got Buffalo this week. Buffalo's tough. I mean, these guys, they can play the run, and I feel like they can shut down, the Sony Michels of the world and some of these other backs that New England has. What I'm expecting out of James White is catches. I expect for the lack of Antonio Brown, there's no real tight end presence. Edelman's been banged up. These targets are going to have to go somewhere, and I don't believe they're all going to Josh Gordon with Tre'Davious White covering him. So I would not be shocked in the slightest to see James White just pile up a ton of catches this week.
18 running back, 1 targets in 3 weeks. I'll take that for sure. Like if he gets 6 targets, you're looking at a pretty solid day on DK.
Right.
All right, Joe, back to you. Who's your cheap date?
I'm just going with the guy that's playing Miami that's super cheap. I'm going with Justin Jackson, and this is Melvin Gordon still out. Justin Jackson has been getting an increased snap share. I think that they might be a little bit worried that Austin Eckler is wearing down. And maybe the film shows that a little bit too. I went back and watched the game from last week. So I think Justin Jackson has a pretty good chance to get into the end zone, catch some passes. I mean, that's going to be a game where they score early, and Justin Jackson could even see mop-up duty.
All right, I'll round us out here on running backs. Mine's Darrell Williams. See our discussion earlier in the show. I mean, if McCoy's limited, if Daniel Williams isn't playing, you're pretty much investing in a high-powered offense, and he's relatively cheap.
And he out-touched LaShawn McCoy last week, even before the injury, so I think it's a good play.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into wide receivers. I'm going to kick us off, and I'm going to stack in my quarterback's game, not with my quarterback, but in that same game, Hunter Renfrow versus Indianapolis. Kind of self-explanatory when you talked about the injuries. If all those guys are missing, I think Hunter Renfrow has a pretty solid game.
Yeah, slot receiver for sure. And they just released Ryan Grant, so I don't know how much more work Hunter Renfrow gets, but it could be a little bit. I think that it's more likely that one of the outside guys like J.J. Nelson sees the bigger increase in workload. At least that's what we saw in week 3 without Ryan Grant. So I think it's a good play.
I'm also predicting this game to be a high-scoring affair, so there's a lot of hopes that he just gets a random, touchdown for 13 yards and then a few more catches, and he gives you a solid fantasy day.
That'll get value for you at that price.
I wouldn't be afraid in a GPP to run with a stack of Carr, Renfrow, and J.J. Nelson, knowing there's no Malik Hooker and no Darius Leonard when they've got no help over the middle and no help deep. We know J.J. Nelson can run. That might be a really interesting stack to run with if you want to get really contrarian.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely a tournament play, not a cash play, but
yeah.
All right, Joe, we're back to you. Your wide receiver cheap date this week is?
I'm going with Will Fuller this week, and it's really based on just price and upside. I think that this is a lot better tournament play than it is a cash play because his floor is literally 0 catches for 0 yards, but he's getting the targets, 7 in each of the last 2 games. He's got 310 air yards. That's 1 more than John Ross, Odell Beckham, a few more than Brandon Cooks. These numbers suggest that there's a market correction coming for Will Fuller. So I'm going to throw him out there in tournaments because I think he can easily get you 6 for 100 and a touchdown, and he's destroyed value if he does.
All right, Jeff, back to you. Who's your wide receiver this week?
Oh, I'm going with F1. Give me Terry McLaurin. F1 McLaurin. Anybody? Nobody? All right. For $4,500, I'm just going to keep willing that one into existence. Give me the guy right now. It's going to see Janoris Jenkins. I just think he's fast enough. He runs good enough routes. I don't care who's playing quarterback. I think this guy is quickly establishing himself as a legitimate wide receiver in the league. And we're not going to have him for very many more weeks where we can qualify him as a cheap date. So I'm going to go ahead and lean on him here.
For the record, I would have picked him myself if he wasn't already in the script with your name next to it earlier. But I do think that it might be a good opportunity to pivot off the chalk, because I could see Terry McLaurin at $4,500 with Janoris Jenkins covering him being 40 or 50% owned on the main slate this week.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely certain that'll be the case. I mean, but when you have a guy like that, sometimes you need that one cheap chalk play to be able to pay up somewhere else or be able to do something else. Maybe it's grab that defense you want to pay up for, anybody who's playing the Dolphins, or maybe you need to make a move at quarterback. You're really wanting to get Mahomes in. There could be another play you're trying to make there. Like I said, I don't mind it if he's a guy I'm really confident is going to get me, 4 to 5x, which I feel like is the case for McLaurin. Then I'll go ahead and run the risk on the chalk.
I'm going to have him in some lineups, but I'm just cautioning you probably don't want to eat the chalk on 100% of your lineups. If you have 100% exposure and he busts, your week is screwed.
Yeah, I generally don't recommend anybody go 100% on any player unless it's a defense playing the Dolphins. That's it.
I hope that Josh Rosen comes out and throws for 4 touchdowns in the first half, and I can send you a little message.
If that's the case, you're going to find me on the nearest bridge.
All right, moving into tight ends. I'll kick us off here. TJ Hawkinson, guys. Kansas City game is going to be a high-scoring affair. It's going to be a lot of garbage time. I feel like this is a pretty good move. That's it. That's my argument.
I feel like just playing anybody against Kansas City, because their defense is just okay. I think it's a good idea. They've given up decent amount of points to the tight end position, but not a whole lot. Like, I don't see massive upside. Like, James O'Shaughnessy was the number 1 guy for the Jags with 7.2 in week 1, but they did give up 12 plus points to the position. Darren Waller was good, but not great. Nick Boyle was actually the leading tight end for Baltimore, but like we already discussed some of the issues that Mark Andrews is having. So I think it's a good play, but I do worry about the upside.
And I don't blame you in the slightest. Jeff, who is your cheap date tight end this week?
I'm going OJ Howard breakout week against the Rams. Chris Godwin's got a hip. Might be a thing. Could be inhibiting him. You're going to see Evans going deep again if that's the case. Someone's got to take up those intermediate touches, and I think we start to see the reemergence of one OJ Howard. Full disclosure, though, I built an entire cheap dates lineup in DK, and Hawkinson was actually my tight end with OJ Howard in my flex. That's how I built this particular lineup. So that's how much faith I have in OJ Howard this week.
I like OJ Howard. Like, I think people gave up on him way too quickly. I think maybe that offense is a little bit too complicated for him to really get in and get targets right away. And they want to have 2 tight ends on the field quite a bit and run the football, but he's so talented. He's going to break out and emerge eventually.
Yeah, and I think he's in a good spot. I mean, you're going into LA, you're playing the Rams, who, when they're on, they are going to put up 30 points. So there's a real possibility that this is going to turn into a track meet, and that suits OJ Howard perfectly.
You hope if Chris Godwin is limited that OJ Howard is more of a big slot receiver, though, because the traditional tight ends so far against the Rams have fared very poorly. Like Greg Olsen, 7.6, Jared Cook, 4.5, and then Demetrius Harris. Like, we didn't really expect much out of him anyway, but he only scored 7.2 with a touchdown. So it's a risky play, and I think that it'll probably be relatively low owned, but there's upside there for sure.
All right, Joe, we're back to you. Who is your tight end cheap date this week?
My tight end cheap date, it almost feels like chasing points, but against Arizona, you just have to play the tight end. You have to play the quarterback. Like, listen to these numbers. TJ Hawkinson, week 1, 25.1 points. Mark Andrews, week 2, 25.2 points. Greg Olsen, week 3, 25.5 points. They are yet to hold a tight end 1 to less than 25 points. So I'm playing Will Dissly. He's got the red zone targets so far this year. He's caught all 3 of them. I could see another one in this game. I'd love a Russell Wilson, Will Dissly stack in tournaments.
All right, and finally, we're going to do our defenses. Joe, you're back up. Who is your defensive cheap date of the week?
I put myself first in this because I want to preface this with the idea that, holy cow, don't pay down for defense this week. The low-cost defenses are absolutely atrocious. It's like scraping the bottom of the barrel. The bottom of the barrel gave me the Falcons versus Tennessee just because I don't believe in Marcus Mariota. I think there will be either a pretty low-scoring game or a game that has quite a few turnovers. I don't love it, though. I would pay up for defense this week.
All right, I'm up next, and I'm going with the Bengals this week playing the Steelers. I like Mason Rudolph. I think there's a lot to be hopeful for going forward, but there's still going to be some jitters. I feel like this game will be a low-scoring affair, a couple sacks, and, keeping them under 14 points. That defense will get you where you need to be. I don't need my defense to score 40 points like the Patriots did that a couple weeks ago. You know what I mean? So, for my cheap date this week, it's the Bengals all the way. And finally, Jeff, end us off here. Which one is your cheap date this week?
Well, I like Joe, I was just punting defense this week. If you're not paying up for whoever's playing the Dolphins, then you're basically going to punt. And I took the Titans against the Falcons because it was $300 cheaper.
I cannot argue with that logic. They're really just, what we're saying here is don't pay down for defense this week. I pay down for defense sometimes. There's good values on the slate, but this is not one of them.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that maybe I'd see a turnover or two. I mean, Kevin Byard's a really good safety who can get you a couple interceptions in a good spot. Jarrell Casey might get you a sack because that O-line's beat up. But I'm not counting on much here. If these guys just break even at, 0 and not get negatives, I'm going to be really happy.
What to watch for.
All right, time for our final segment. Our What to Watch For is for Week 4. Joe, kick us off.
Tonight, I'm going to be watching that Packers offense. So far, it seems like their scripted plays are working. They're good in the first quarter, but after the first few series, things go completely off the rails. With the way this Eagles secondary has been playing, this looks like a get-right matchup for Rodgers, Adams, and, the slew of wide receiver sevens Green Bay seems to be running out there every week. If Aaron and the boys can't get it right tonight, I don't know if they're going to get it right at all this year.
1, 2, 3. I'm going to spend all day Sunday waiting for the Sunday night game. This matchup means a lot for New Orleans. They face off against the Cowboys. The other teams in the NFC South have tough matchups also and could all lose, pushing all three of those teams to 1-3. Meanwhile, a win for New Orleans could give them a 2-game lead in what is typically a very close division. The Cowboys might be underestimating them with Breeze on the sideline, so an upset could be in the works.
Are you ready? Ready for a matchup of undefeated teams in Week 4? Well, you get the Bills versus the Pats. Yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown, but I'll be watching this game pretty closely. The Bills are showing signs of actual relevancy for the first time in years, and this is their biggest test. Will they lose? Yeah, I think so. The bigger question, though, is will Josh Allen and company continue to be fantasy relevant against a strong defense? What we learn in this week could affect your team the rest of the season. John Brown, Cole Beasley, Josh Allen. There's a lot of fantasy names that will show you what they can do against solid defenses this week.
The Browns need to right the ship pretty fast. A loss to Baltimore this week will drive them to 1-3, and the schedule isn't getting any easier with the 49ers, Seahawks, Patriots, Broncos, and Bills all coming up. And it's completely possible the Browns could be 3-6 at the end of that stretch, which would be a major departure from what most people were expecting.
But not from reality. It's the Browns.
I haven't beating the Broncos, Murph.
You shut your mouth.
Well, this is the last week that we're going to see lead back Austin Eckler. I'm just going to savor it, man. I hate the Chargers, especially that guy with all those kids, but I like watching Austin Eckler play. Like, let's just hope the Chargers can figure out how to deploy both of these backs to the best of their abilities going forward.
1, 2, 3.
Jay Gruden has to be on the hot seat right now. No matter how bad the management is in Washington, they can't ignore an 0-4 start. Will Danny Dimes continue to improve and deal the Redskins a punch to the gut? As much as I love their defense, I got my popcorn ready. Let the countdown to one less Gruden in the NFL begin.
Hey, this pep talk worked. I could do without all the Grudens, but I hated John Gruden on Monday Night Football. I think I might be like a little bit in the minority here based on how much I've said that and had people argue with me, but I didn't like the people that came after him anymore. But can we just get somebody that's actually awesome on Monday Night Football?
I liked Gruden. I mean, I liked Gruden, and I like Gruden compared to a lot of the other people we had seen in the booth. And most recently, I mean, Booger's terrible.
He's
Witten's
way worse.
Terrible.
Yeah,
those guys are way worse than Gruden.
But still.
Who was before Gruden, though?
I'm going back to Frank and Alan Dan, man. That was the good stuff. The golden year.
That was the good stuff. Yeah, like when they had, what was his name? The comedian they had in there for a little while. Dennis Miller. Yeah, that was awful.
Awful. Like, why can't they just get somebody good in there?
John Madden was good for a little bit.
Can they just overpay Tony Romo to come be on Monday Night Football? I would pay to see that.
I'd be fine with it. Jeez, give me Tony Romo, give me Peyton Manning, give me somebody who can actually talk about the game and not sound like Booger McFarlane.
You know who I want to see? This is my answer to this question every time somebody asks me.
Oh, no.
Pat McAfee.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That'd be
game.
all right. We'd get such great special teams analysis.
Because who doesn't love punters, right? They're people too.
They're not.
Punters
Don't
are
let
like
them lie to you.
way more important than people give them credit for.
They are huge.
I didn't say they weren't important. I just said they weren't people. They should be androids that go out there and kick the ball down inside the 5-yard line every single time.
Don't you say that.
That's what
Thank God for Pat McAfee, man. He's not an android and it's hilarious to watch him. Just saying.
I do like Pat McAfee. I'll give you that one.
All right, that'll do it for our Week 4 preview episode. We'll be back on Tuesday of next week with all our analysis of Week 4 and hopefully some good vibes. For Joe at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter, for Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo, and of course myself at MurphyFFT, or find us all on Facebook in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group. Bye, guys.
Later.
Peace and hair grease.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.
Jeff is crazy.
I don't know. It was just the first thing that popped in my head. I don't know.
All right, that'll do it for our Week 4. That's going to be an outtake.
Thanks for the outtake, Murph.
I killed Jeff. Oh my gosh.
No, you can't do
Head
it.
hits the desk. And these will all be on the outtakes. Like, I don't know if you got the thud of my head hitting the desk there. Just laughing at Murph.
All right, that'll do it for our Week 4 preview show, guys. I'm excited to watch football this week. I'm even more excited to get back with y'all and talk about it on Tuesday. Nothing? Really? Nothing?
On Tuesday? I mean, we release a show on Tuesday, but I'm really looking forward to talking to you on Monday night because we're doing it during the game.
Semantics. All right, I'm just going to redo that whole thing. Depressing.
Now you have to leave all of it at all stays. We did such a good job this whole show, and then we realized we had all this extra time, and we didn't know what to do with ourselves. I apologize to anybody who's still listening.